The Dukes of Dice are brought to you by Game Toppers, forgotten fountain pen hobbies, and listeners like you.
Welcome to the Duchy. It's time for another episode of the Dukes of Dice podcast, a proud member of the Dice Tower Network.
Coming to you from the Duchy in the Duke City, Albuquerque, New Mexico, it's the Dukes of Dice, a podcast about board, card, and probably not role-playing games. Today, Alex is away on back-to-back trips, and Sean has to hold down the Duchy on his own. Fortunately, he gets some help from the local Albuquerque Duchy. Former Wham Boy Matt Walker and rules explainer extraordinaire Eugene Chavez. The three sit down to review Carnegie from Quined Games. And now, the Duke of Dice. Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. This is Sean, and just Sean. And you're joining us you're joining me, us, the royal us, for episode 277, which, this is ironic, we're calling Practice. Practice. That title comes from Archie and Gurr. We've had this sort of one-name challenge for a while, or one-word title challenge for a while, and it's the old joke, hey, how'd you get to Carnegie Hall? Oh, practice, practice, practice. So it's interesting that the joke is technically, the punchline is 3 words, practice, 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 but now we've taken it down to just the one for the one word name challenge. So good job, Archie and Gurr. Because we're talking about Carnegie. That's really all we're talking about. We don't have a double take. We don't have recent plays. We get help naming all of our episodes over on our Board Game Geek Guild. That's Guild number 2008. And we've actually got some runners up, which I will give you at the end of the episode after the review. As you heard from the intro, it's just me today. Alex is not here. He is on back-to-back trips, but he's getting some board gaming in, so that's always good. And so a little bit later, I'm going to be joined by you've heard him before, Matt Walker. He and Matthew, they used to do their Wham review, call them the Wham Boys, and then Eugene will be joining me as well. Join both of us as well. And he's mentioned like every episode. He teaches us all the games and explains all the rules and good stuff there. It's going to be a mostly abbreviated episode. I've got some plays, but it doesn't really feel like it's worthwhile talking about them right now in this setting. Some of them for our next review. In fact, I have started playing, Elden Ring on the Xbox, and that's been sucking up a lot of my time. I'm not too far in. It's sort of a, sandbox, open world. You go on some quests and you explore the world and you level up, gain experience. I keep hearing from a lot of people that it's like the most amazing gaming, console gaming experience that they've had. So I'm really enjoying it so far. There's nothing in it as of yet that I'm just like, this is blowing my mind. I think when I first played Fallout 4 was probably the single greatest video game experience that I've had. I don't know. It's fun. That's what's kind of going on here. Still same old construction woes at the office. And I'm recording this on Father's Day, by the way. We recorded the review a couple days before, getting around to doing the intro and the outro here. It's on Father's Day, so happy belated Father's Day by the time you're hearing this for all of the father listeners out there. But all right, well, that's all I got. I think we'll go over to a quick ad break, and then after that, the review of Carnegie. Well, Alex, it appears that the Game Toppers 3.5 Kickstarter has come and gone, raising almost $300,000. Whew, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of cheese.
Now, Sean, you said it appears. Are you indicating that this is perhaps an illusion and there's a secret Kickstarter campaign going on at the same time while the main campaign appears to have ended? There's a parallel reality where the...
It's over.
It's over.
Okay,
sorry.
It's just done. It's done. And if you want to get, some of the stuff from the Kickstarter, I guess you're kind of out of luck.
Yeah, unless there was some sort of alternative reality where perhaps those who weren't on time, they weren't early either. They're not early. They're not on time. They've come to this. What's the word I'm looking for? They want to pledge.
If only you could have a tardy pledge. You can make a tardy
Yeah, a
pledge.
tardy play. Yeah, that's sort of what I'm looking for, but it's not quite. So it's again, you wanted to pledge early, but you didn't. You want to pledge on time, but you didn't. So there's a third state there. Well, anyway, that state I think is actually open. Oh, it's open. Oh, late pledges. Late pledges are open,
Oh,
Sean.
that's the word. Yeah, so if you want to get the new Mycroft or the new Moriarty, if you want to get leg kits, if you want to get some awesome new playmats, some with art by Vincent Dutrait, then you can go over to Kickstarter. You can look up the Game Toppers 3.5. There's this big blue late pledge button. If you're on a phone, you push it with your thumb. If you're on a computer, you click it with your mouse, unless it's your touch screen. And I guess you could, usually with a touch screen, you're not using a thumb, you're usually your index finger.
Use a thumb if you want to. I'm not judging. Yeah, look, I'm not judging what finger you want to use to press the button. Just, press the button.
Now, it does say late pledge starting June 2nd. That's come and gone for a limited time. So I would hurry. And I believe we're looking still at kind of a quick fulfillment here. So I would definitely do this sooner rather than later. These are very high quality table toppers. I play on them all the time. Alex, you've got one in your home. These are fantastic. Can't recommend them highly enough. So definitely go check it out on the Kickstarter or go check out GameToppersLLC.com.
Remember, if it's not a showstopper, it's not a game topper.
Well, it's another Euro game about 19th century robber barons, this time a steel baron, Andrew Carnegie. Does this game make you feel like one of those steel barons? Or if you were Alex playing this game, would it just leave you feeling barren? We'll tell you, it's Carnegie. Carnegie is a 2022 Euro game designed by Xavier Georges with art by Ian O'Toole, and it's published by Quined Games. So let's talk a little bit then about the overview, some rules. I'm not going to go too deep because it's a wild one. And we talk a little bit in the review in more detail about some of the mechanisms. So let's see what we can do here. This game is inspired by the life of Andrew Carnegie, who was born in Scotland in 1835 and emigrated to the United States with his parents in 1848. Although Carnegie started his career as a telegraph operator, his role as a major player in the rise of the United States steel industry made him one of the richest men in the world and an icon of the American dream. Carnegie was also a benefactor and philanthropist. Upon his death in 1919, more than $350 million of his wealth was bequeathed to various foundations, with another $30 million going to various charities. His endowments created nearly 2,500 free public libraries that bear his name to this day, the Carnegie Libraries. All right, now let's talk about the game. In Carnegie, players will recruit employees and expand their businesses by investing in real estate, producing goods, developing transport technology, and creating transport chains across the United States. Perhaps they will even become illustrious benefactors who contribute to the country's greatness through their deeds and generosity. The game takes place over 20 rounds, with players each having one turn per round. In each round, the active player will choose one of 4 actions, with the other players will then follow. The success of a player's company is represented by their victory points, and the player with the most VP at the end of the game will be declared the winner, known forevermore for their philanthropic works. All right, so yeah, let's break that down just a tad. You've got a board in the center. It's a map of the United States. It's divided into 4 regions: the West, Midwest, East, and the South. Within each of these regions, there are large cities, medium cities, and small cities. Each of these cities has some number of spots available for player discs to be placed. Large cities might have 4 and 5. The small cities only have 1. These cities are linked. There are chains that link these cities. And one of the things that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to develop these contiguous chains from a city to the next. The more cities that you're placed in, you might be scoring some points for those cities at the end of the game. But then also there's an end game scoring where you're going to score based on this chart for various connection spots that you've reached, and also the level of your technology, your transportation technology that's advanced. There's basically, in each region, there are 3 levels of transportation technology, and it kind of looks at what's the worst of those among the regions that you've linked. And so there's that kind of desire to move them all up, advance all of those transportation technologies similarly. Going back to the cities, I should also point out that within a given, say, large city or medium city where there are multiple spots, certain spots require specific types of buildings to be built. And there are 4 types. There's housing, there's the commercial, financial, there are public works, and there is industry. And finishing up on the main board, there's also a spot at the top to make donations. This is that philanthropic work. Basically, to place out a donation, it costs you $5. Then the next one costs you 10, and then 15, and so on. And there are different categories of donations, but basically this is endgame scoring. So at the end of the game, it's going to say for every disc that you've placed in the South, for example, and there's one for the South and the West and the East and the Midwest, you're going to get 2 points, something like that. And it does it for all the different aspects of the game. And so these are exclusive spots. Also around the edge of the board is the victory tracker. Pretty standard stuff. All right, moving to the player boards. So this is your company board, and you have this brown brick building that's your company board. There are 4 different levels, and I believe there are 4. There's 4 offices or 4 rooms on each level. You start the game with a lobby already built, and then you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 other offices that have already been built. All of the other rooms are empty, and throughout the course of the game, you'll be taking actions to build new rooms. But importantly, in order to use these new offices, you have to staff them with people. There's 4 actions that you'll use, or 4 groups of actions. One of them will allow you, it's your human resources, allows you to move your meeples that are on your building. You start with, I think you start with 6. Ooh, I don't remember. I'll have to look that up. And so the start of the game, you can move them into certain points of movement, move them orthogonally into the various rooms. And then once they've moved, you have to pay to train them or activate them is what the game calls it, so that you could then use the benefits of those various offices. Now, you're going to score points at the end of the game for building offices on the 3rd floor. You're going to score even more points at the end of the game for building offices on the 4th floor. The problem is that those are farther away from the lobby, so it takes some more work to get people up to those offices through the movement. So also on your board, you have these little inserts. These are the project tabs, and there's projects. Basically, these correspond to those types of buildings I mentioned earlier: housing, commercial, public works, and industry. And these tabs, they basically slot in. They slot into your company board, and throughout the game, you're going to take a certain R&D action to pull these tabs, these project tabs out, revealing more and more buildings of that type that you can later place out. And then as you place out these buildings, they're going to give you the revealed portions of the project tabs are going to give you additional income, which is very important and something that I'm very bad at. So that is your job board or your company board. Now, what the turn or the round looks like I mentioned in the intro, there are basically 20 turns of the game, and you're going to go around the table. Everyone gets to choose an action that everyone else is going to do, and then the next player does it, and then so on and so on. So, as I mentioned, there are 4 different types of actions, 4 different groups of actions, and there is I think it's called the timeline board, and basically it is those. It's 4 rows and 4 columns, and there is a tracker on each of the rows, and you choose which of those trackers that you're going to advance. Now, when you advance it, whichever tracker that you've picked, that represents the action. So each tracker is the type of action, but where you advance it is going to determine if there's going to either trigger a donation, where you're paying money to put discs out on the donation spaces for endgame points, or if there's going to be income associated with a region. And so when you're choosing your action, you're kind of weighing that back and forth, to what extent do I need this action now? To what extent do I care more about generating the income or making donations? So that's sort of an interesting aspect of the game. So what I'll do, let's say it's my turn and I say, I'm going to go and do the human resources action where I move that, and it triggers income for the West. Now, early on in the game, there's probably not going to be any income because in order to generate income, you need to have sent out workers on missions to the various regions. And once they're out there, you could then recall them back to your office and you'll generate income based on that region. Wherever your transportation technology is at will determine what income you get. And then also any of your uncovered project tab income spots will also generate you that income. But early on, that's not happening a whole lot. So you've got to send people out to the board, to the map, to the US, the regions, in order to be able to benefit from that income. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the rest of the actions here, because we kind of go into that in some detail in the review itself. And I think you should be able to follow along with that. But yeah, this just keeps happening. You keep going around. You're going to be taking actions that are basically placing your buildings out on the board, creating these chains. You're going to be getting income intermittently in the form of money and in the form of resource cubes. There's just one type of resource cube that just kind of represents raw production, raw resource that's necessary for building of buildings and building new offices, things like that. You will be adding new offices to your company board. You will be expanding your knowledge through R&D. Again, that's pulling out your project tabs. That's also advancing on the different technology, the transportation technology tracks, one for each region. And then at the end of the game, most players will have a couple points, 0 points, 10 points, who knows? Not a high scoring game in terms of during the actual game itself, the gameplay itself, but there's all this end game scoring at the end. And I've kind of described it all the way through. But basically one of the biggest things is your transportation links, the links between the cities, scoring points for the actual printed value on certain cities. So for example, New York is worth more than Santa Fe in terms of actual printed points there. You're scoring points for the offices, what levels you've built them on. You're scoring points for some of your project tabs. If you've pulled them out far enough and revealed enough of those buildings, some of them will score you end game points. And then a big chunk is also going to come from the donations. Some games people might have out 3, 4, 5, 6 donations. So all of those can really add up. All right. Well, that is a brief overview, probably not quite as brief as I thought it was going to be, of Carnegie. And now let's head over to me, Matt, and Eugene to see what we think about it. All right. Well, that was a wonderful rules explanation by me that everybody just heard. Wouldn't you guys agree?
That was a great rules explanation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. So I'm joined here by one of the Matts, Matt Walker, formerly of Wham.
How's it going?
Is it formerly of Wham? Wham?
I think Wham's been on hiatus for about 4 years now. So,
okay.
Yeah. I don't think it's a thing anymore.
But this is what, your 4th, 5th podcast appearance?
I think it's my 4th. Should have been my 5th.
Oh boy.
But yeah. I didn't get your text message.
But here's the thing. I was able to gift the world with a solo review, a 45-minute solo review of Libertalia. I mean, who else could do that?
No one. I mean, think of how lucky your listeners are to be blessed with such a fine exhibition.
So lucky. But then we're also joined by Eugene Chavez. Eugene.
Hello. Hi. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm here.
You are here.
I'm first time on the podcast.
Yes. Although
I think
you're mentioned about once an episode at
yes,
least.
I think I'm the most mentioned person on the podcast that has never actually been on the podcast.
That is true.
It's probably true. I mean, we could probably run the statistics on that, but
I'm sure there are listeners that would be willing to do that.
Perhaps.
So, Eugene, since this is your first time on the show, and people will remember me mentioning Eugene whenever I'm like, oh yeah, this is the game we're reviewing, and Eugene taught it to me.
Yes.
Or Eugene broke down this game and then taught it to me. Or basically something like that. Eugene taught me the game. So, Eugene, you want to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself so they have an idea of who you are as a person, but more importantly, as a gamer.
As a gamer.
Right.
Okay. So this is putting me on the spot.
Yes.
Yes, it is. So I don't like to talk about myself that much. That's probably one of the reasons I haven't been on this podcast.
I don't like to do that either, talking about myself. Ever.
But I am usually the one reading and teaching these game rules. Is probably my superpower. I get to remember all these things way too well.
Yeah, and the thing is, you still enjoy it.
Yes. I get burnt out sometimes.
Do you? Okay.
Yes. But I'm in a good spot right now.
Well, that's good. Because I feel like there used to be like this supreme joy of getting a new game in, learning it, breaking it down, coming up with organizational things. And I can't stand that anymore.
Yeah, I do that like every week because I do all the stuff here at Empire. I'm pretty much have done probably at least half of the games in the store by now.
Oh, yeah.
So I've read a lot of rule books.
Yeah. And you've got excellent recall even after you've not played the game for quite a while.
That's true. Again, that's probably my superpower.
We just played, what's it called? Guilds of the Exploring Merchant?
The Guild of Merchant Explorers.
Yeah. And so you pretty much just taught it. I mean, I'm sure you read the rules like, what, a week ago, 2 weeks ago?
Earlier today.
Oh, okay. Well, never mind. Not so impressive then. I take it back. All right. Well, Eugene, it's great to finally have you on the podcast.
Well, thank you.
And Matt, you're also here.
Yes, here I am.
Okay. Well, it's better than not being here, I suppose.
So we're going to have to rate this game at the end, correct?
We are.
Okay. I kind of have an aversion to rating things. I'll tell you that, like, I listen to stuff. I was on the internet during the heyday of Pitchfork in the early 2000s, where everything was, is this an 8.3 or is it an 8.4? And then I just kind of, like, got very adverse to rating things. I don't like rating things.
Well, but at least there's no like, it's not so granular. Like there's no decimals allowed.
Oh, there's a high 5.
Yes, not a decimal.
Not a 5.5, a high 5.
Well, no, I think a high 5. If we're going to be a decimal,
a high 5 is where you join palms.
5.8, 5.87.
Okay.
So
yes.
We're not going to get that granular. It's broad strokes. I think you'll manage.
Okay.
All right. So let's talk about Carnegie. Is it Carnegie or Carnegie? I feel like it's Carnegie, right?
I think it's Carnegie.
Carnegie?
I believe that's how I learned it in U.S. history back in 11th grade.
So Carnegie Hall I'm mispronouncing that?
No, I
Everybody
think
is.
it's like Notre Dame and Notre Dame.
Oh, I'm so confused right now. All right. Well, so the first thing we talk about is kind of expectations or how we first became exposed to the game, what we thought going in. I'll just say for me, I was aware that it was on Kickstarter. I knew it was another game by Xavier Georges, who did Carson City, a game that I quite enjoyed, although I got rid of it. Kind of a regret getting rid of it. But other than that, I didn't know a whole lot about it. Sylvain Lacroix a couple of weeks ago mentioned that I should probably get a play of this because he said it's quite good. He thought I'd like it. And so, yeah, I mean, I was excited to play it. What about you guys?
Well, I backed this on Kickstarter. We played this game on Tabletop Simulator and Board Game Arena during the Kickstarter. I know that they used some of the information from their Board Game Arena stats to balance the game in the final form. So when we played it then, it was in a slightly different form than it is now. And I just got it in Kickstarter. So it's here.
How did you know that it was, like, what interested you about it?
The action selection mechanism in the game, that's what really drew me to the game. The fact that you have 20 actions in the game, and each selection of the action, like, triggers a different thing, so you kind of have to timing when you're doing things. So, like, do I trigger this now, or do I wait till later, or hope that somebody else triggers this before I do? So you have a lot of considerations, a lot of interaction with considering what the other player's state of their board is.
Sure. And so then, Matt, you played it online too during the Kickstarter?
Yes, that was my first exposure to it. It wasn't even on my radar until Eugene brought it up. This was in the middle days of COVID when we were playing regularly online a lot. And so it was one of our Wednesday night selections, and Eugene taught it to us. So it wasn't even on my radar at all, but I was pleasantly surprised.
But you didn't back it.
I did not back it because I knew Eugene had backed it, and Jeremy also backed it as well. I didn't think all three of us needed to own it.
I feel like we've gotten somewhat better at not like all backing the exact same thing.
Yeah, I think so too. It used to be a big problem for a while, but I think we've kind of, in our little group here, we've kind of managed to even that out a bit.
Sure. All right, well, let's talk about rulebook and how we all learned the game. I learned the game from Eugene.
As did I.
Oh. So, Eugene, do you have anything you can contribute about the rulebook? What'd you think about it?
So I believe that this rulebook is different from the first time that I played the game. There's definitely some changes in the rules. So it's a rulebook that kind of goes through an overview at the start, telling you what the different things in this game is, different concepts of the game, before going into the actual meat of all the actions of the game. I think it's pretty well laid out. It's pretty obvious where you find all the answers in this game. I don't think there's anything hidden on a random paragraph that I couldn't find or need to search forever for. There's a lot of good examples in the rule book. A lot of clear pictures as well. So I think it's pretty well done.
You know what I'm noticing? I'm noticing some blank portions of pages. If you flip back a couple pages there.
Yes.
And that's fine. I think there's a lot of publishers that are afraid of blank portions of rulebooks, but I think it serves to say like, okay, we're going to talk about this action, and it's not going to take up the entire page. And so instead of like cramming something else in, I feel like that's a little thing, but I feel like that kind of helps with readability and organization and like quick recognition as you're like flipping through for reference.
Yes, it does a lot. And I like that there aren't any stray paragraphs in here. I recall that several rule books where you'll get to the end of the page and then there's a paragraph on the top of the next page, but you kind of like miss that if you're just reading the first page. You'll just have a paragraph up here and it's like, oh yeah, by the way, don't forget this.
Yeah. So overall, in terms of rule books for heavy or medium heavy Euros,
I think this is well done.
Okay. And I feel like I'm trying to remember from like Carson City. What was the other big one he did?
Trois.
Trois. That's right. Although I don't remember the Trois rule book because I think you taught me that.
And Ginkopolis.
Oh, and Ginkopolis. Yeah. But those are both a little bit lighter.
Yes.
And I think Carson City is like a smidge lighter.
It's been a while since I've read that rule book. I don't think that the Carson City rule book is quite as well laid out as this one, though.
Okay. Well, so let's talk about art and components. And first off, so you have the Kickstarter copy, and so we're not quite sure about differences between Kickstarter and retail. Is that right?
Yes. I think some of the metal pieces that are in the Kickstarter version are wooden in the retail version. There's some screen printing on some of the pieces on here that's not on the retail version. And I think those are the major two. Oh, no shiny money.
Yeah. Shiny money. It's weird. So it's just like a foil finish to it. And it looks, I don't know.
It looks like those Andes mints. That's what I think when I see it. those little chocolate dinner mints.
Yeah.
That's what it looks like to me.
All right, so overall though, let's just talk components first. What do you guys think of the components of this Kickstarter edition?
Oh, I think they're super great. Yeah, I think it's a very high quality on the Kickstarter production. The wooden pieces are nice and chunky, which I like. Really heavy, thick cardboard on the player boards and on the sliding pieces that go in and out as well. Yeah, I think it's very well done.
Well, so I probably mentioned it to some degree in the rules overview. Can you explain the slidey pieces a bit more?
Oh, yeah, the
project tabs.
Project tabs. They actually insert into your player board, and as you progress, you can spend research points to slide them out further, which gets you access to more buildings you can build on the map, and extra income as those buildings get built.
Yeah, I think they could have made a choice to just say, we're not going to do these insets, and you just slide it under your board, kind of, and that would have been, I think, a nightmare and super fiddly, especially where your company board, like, you can knock stuff around. You can knock around your meeples. You can knock around the departments that you place on them. So I feel like it was probably expensive to do that, but they did it. So I think it's really solid.
Yeah, I think it's worth it. I mean, other publishers might have done a whole separate player board with all the discs out on them at once, and you just reveal them as you go and slide across like that. So I think it's a terrific choice.
Other components?
Beautiful game board, Ian O'Toole art. This color palette is very similar to his color palette that he used in the Vinyos.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he likes his pastels, which, I mean, it's nice. It's a nice looking board.
Yeah, I think it's terrific looking. I'm a big fan of this one.
And then, so as far as like the rest of the components, you've got a bunch of meeples, you've got a bunch of discs. The Kickstarter, I think you said, Eugene, it's the screen printed. I don't know that the retail will have screen printing.
It doesn't appear so.
That's too bad. It's pretty nice. Iconography. What do you guys think about the iconography of the game?
So, it's all on the back of the rulebook, which is nicely done. There's a few of the department tiles that I definitely needed to refer back to the rulebook to see exactly what that means. There's some that are more involved than others, but because this rulebook is well laid out, I was able to find it easily and find the correct answer. And so I think it's pretty well done. There is quite a few icons in this game, but I think that they are done pretty well, and there's a lot of references for it. So
yeah, so there's like symbols for when you get a new worker, or symbols for activating them or laying them down or anything like that. I did find, and I think that there's sort of a theme here, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but the game felt very opaque, and a lot to learn and a lot to understand how everything interacted with each other. And I think that's a good thing. But also in some of the iconography, yeah, there was definitely, well, I think it's clear, and I think, well, maybe not clear. Well, I think it makes sense, and it provides the references. I felt like I had to stare at the departments quite a bit, try and parse it. And then once I had it, once it was on my company board, I knew what it did. But I felt like I was constantly having to like translate the iconography. And I think that's just part of, at least for me, the opaqueness of the game.
yeah, you get a lot of different departments during the course of the game, and trying to figure out how each one activates, because each one activates in a different way for the most part. There's only a couple that are very, very similar. So yeah, there's a lot in any given turn, but there's only 4 possible actions in the game, so you will see these activations done a lot during the course of the game. So it's something that becomes familiar by the middle of the game.
Right. Well, and so let's talk about gameplay. So what I will say is it's not really 4 actions, right? It's 4 categories of actions that might have different sub-actions based on what departments you have.
Yes.
So on your starter, what's
Departments.
it called? No, what's the board called?
Player board?
Yeah, but it's called the
Company board.
Company board. I've already said it like 3 times. I completely forgot. Okay, so how many different sub-actions do you have available to you on just the company board?
5.
Okay. And it's, so basically so let's talk about the actions, the action categories. So you've got the move, which is
human resources.
Human resources. So this is kind of interesting, and we may kind of be interspersing theme here a little bit, but it's this idea that you have these different departments in this sort of like brick building of yours, and in order for you to use the different actions on the departments, you have to have meeples that have moved from one department to another and then are activated. And it's almost, because it's the human resources that's moving them around, it's almost like you're allocating the people, but also training, and that's part of the activation because it usually costs some amount of money to actually stand them up. And so while it's in sort of a Euro, abstract sense, you're just moving people around orthogonally, really it's this idea of kind of training them up and teaching them the job, which I think is kind of interesting.
Yeah, human resources allows players to train employees and assign them to different departments, as it says verbatim from the rulebook. So yeah, I think that kind of like moving these around in different parts of your company, training them up in different ways, not like strictly 100% thematic, but a little bit of theme.
Well, and so
Euro type theme.
And so, like, it also depends like how many people you actually have staffed in human resources. So basically for every person in human resources, you get 3 points of movement. And so it's like, hey, if you have an understaffed human resources, it's just Barb down there, you're not going to be as efficient getting people in the right spot. Whereas if you have a whole team in human resources, you're a little better at it.
Yeah.
So so the next the next action category is management, or the octopus as we like to call it.
Yes.
Because it looks like an octopus, in case that wasn't clear.
Yes. A little bit of an octopus.
So on the company board, there are 2 different departments associated with this action.
At the start of the game.
At the start of the game, right. One of them basically gets you money or cubes, so you can get a lesser amount of money in cubes if you leave your meeple on your player board, or a greater amount if you decide to send them on a mission.
That's correct.
To one of the 4 regions that I'm sure I mentioned in the rules overview. But then there's kind of an interesting like push and pull of, I need to have meeples on my board to do stuff, but I also need them out on the main board so I can recall them and get income. And it's an interesting tension there. And then what's the other starter management action you have available to you?
Building new departments.
Yeah, so this is using cubes, and it costs you less cubes if you're laying it over a meeple that you've moved into one of the empty departments. I guess they're sort of like a day laborer that's done I don't know.
They've been relocated to that department from another city, I guess.
Oh, okay. So they're just waiting for the department to
open up.
Okay, all right. Is that what it says in the rules?
No, I'm guessing.
I'm like, oh, okay, I guess that makes sense. And so there's interesting things there too, because you're curious about, where am I going to put this so I can have meeples access it, but then also the higher up I go, the farther away from the lobby I go, the more points it's worth at the end of the game.
And if they're just sitting there in an empty space, they're not doing any work.
Right. So lots of decisions there. The next action category is construction. And this is where you are building these different types of buildings from your project
You're building
tabs.
different project industries from your project tabs
Right.
into different cities in the United States of America.
So you've got the housing project tab. You've got the commercial project
Banking,
tab.
I believe.
Is it banking? Okay. You've got the industry, and then you've got public works?
Infrastructure.
Infrastructure. All right. I like public works better.
Same thing.
Well, yeah. So this is what is putting stuff out on the board, putting the discs out on the board that's kind of doing your route building, which is really important for endgame scoring. And there's a little bit of cutting each other off, but it doesn't seem... Did it seem super cutthroat?
No, I don't think so. I think the map is fairly wide open, and I've been able to make some good connections in every game I've played. But you can block some people off. Like I was able to block Eugene off from connecting all 4 of the major cities in this last game we just played.
because you've got the major cities that have like 4 or 5 spots. You've got the smaller cities that have like 3.
And they're also specific slots, so you have to put the specific disc in that slot. So a banking disc has to go in a banking slot.
Right. And then the last action category is it just research? Is that what it's called?
R&D.
Oh, R&D. Okay. Well, I was half right. And this is interesting too. So you're using the R&D to pull out your project tabs, so you have more buildings available, potentially giving you more income, and then also moving your what's it called? The routes?
Transportation income, I believe. Transport
links?
Transportation tracks.
Transportation tracks. Yeah, so you've got one for each of the regions, right? And it's just really interesting because they don't do a whole lot sitting there on the basic departments, but otherwise you're not progressing your engine along, so to speak. So
yeah, moving the transportation tracks is interesting because that's how you get the income. And what's unique about this, or something I don't really see, is that the incomes that you receive from the regions are not cumulative.
Yeah.
So you can, like, at start you'll get some money, but at some point you're not getting money anymore from them. You're getting something else, which may not be useful, and you can't go back. I think there might be a tile from the expansion that allows you to take an earlier transportation income, but for the most part, you just have to take what you have now. So you want to move it up so you get more points in the track bonuses, but you may be placed in a spot where it's going to give you less desirable income.
Yeah, I was noticing that at one point because I'm like, okay, this last game we played, I was doing a very heavy donation strategy, which meant I needed a lot of money. And so I was moving all of my transportation tracks to the most money I could. And then at one point I realized, if I move this west track up again, then I'm going to lose out on money. It's going to be cubes instead. And I've got plenty of cubes. I don't need to worry about that. So that was interesting too. But then I also had a donation where I was getting points for every train threshold I had reached on each of the tracks. And I'm like, well, I kind of need that, but I also kind of need this money to keep playing more or putting out more donations. So yeah, interesting choices there as well. So let's talk a little bit about then the action selection, right? It's one of those, the active player chooses the action. Everyone else has to do that action, but then it's also tied to potential income in a particular region or triggering a donation. So what did you guys think about those choices?
It gets really interesting, especially when you want to trigger a particular action to do stuff, but it may provide a lot of income to somebody else, or like almost nothing to you. Or you may want to trigger something that like will trigger an income for everybody, but they won't get a lot. So it's kind of like, well, how much do I set up for this? The game that we played last week was more crazy with that because the construction action is what you actually place the cubes on and it actually gives you those incomes. But in that game, nobody really picked construction until the second half of the game. So every time we were doing a income action, we weren't getting a lot of income. Whereas in the game we just played tonight, a lot of construction actions were played at the beginning of the game, so we were generating more income from our income steps than we were in the game we played last week.
Right.
Yeah, it's a really difficult decision when it's your turn to select that action, to find that balance in between what's going to benefit you but not benefit everyone else as much.
And I found myself even looking at, okay, what do I think the player before me is going to choose? What do I think the player after me is going to choose? Because there's some feel bad moments when somebody chooses build and you don't have anybody staffing any of your build departments, or you don't have the cubes for it, the resource cubes for it. And it's almost kind of like a wasted action. Like of your 20 actions, you're now down to 19 because you got little to no benefit off that. Or hey, we're going to, Eugene, are you likely to pick the action that's going to trigger a donation? And I don't have enough money for that. So maybe I need to take an action that's going to get me money, even though that's maybe not the most so it could be, okay, I'm going to choose this action. I'm really not going to get good use of this action, but it's triggering a region income where I will get something out of it. And it's really frustrating in a good way. I mean, I like that when you're just trying to balance, what do I need to do? What's everyone else doing? And it's nice sometimes, like, look at the next player and be like, oh, well, they don't have money, so they're not likely to trigger the donation, but maybe they really need that action. And so there's a lot of, for medium heavy Euros where there's not necessarily a lot of interaction, I feel like you have to be very cognizant of what everyone else is doing and trying to predict what they're going to do, even though I felt like I was really bad at that.
But I haven't found it to be super punishing.
Yeah.
Like maybe in other games, because it seems like even towards the end of the game, if you're able to pull one of your workers back, you're still going to get something out of that action, So it's not, there's never like a completely wasted turn, I don't think, except maybe early on. And unfortunately, in the 4-player games, you have that mulligan tile, which can bail you out if someone picks something where you're just absolutely not going to get anything.
Yeah, and it was interesting, the 3-player game, only the 3rd player in turn order got their mulligan tile, which was a nice balancing aspect, because they have one fewer selection.
Yeah, so there's 20 actions in the game, so the 3rd player will choose 6 times.
Right.
And the other 2 will choose the action 7 times.
Right, right. Yeah, I thought that was well, I don't know, you were the 3rd player this last time, Eugene. Did you think that was a good balancing factor for having, I guess it makes sense, right?
It got the most difficult thing about the 3rd player in the 3-player game was that I had no agency over the last 2 actions of the game.
Right.
So I had to use the tile during the middle of the game so that I could start setting up better incomes. But I was kind of there was a lot of things that I could not account for because I had the 3rd to last pick of the game.
Right. So in that sense, because I was saying in this last game, like, I kind of like it at 3 because it's a little bit, felt a little bit snappier. We did it in, I think we figured like an hour and 15 minutes.
Yeah, under 90 minutes.
Whereas our 4th game, or excuse me, our previous game with 4 players, which was the first game for me and Trevor, how long was that play at?
That was about 2.5 hours.
Okay.
Yeah, we started about 6, finished at 8:30. That includes teach. Okay.
So about 2 hours-ish of gameplay.
I mean, none of us are particularly AP prone, so
Sure.
that was a plus.
Sure. So do you guys have a preference, you think, for player count?
I have played at all player counts except solo.
Okay.
I think it plays pretty well at all the counts. It gets kind of interesting in 2 and 3 because it does have the dummy player stuff that's placed on the board in both the cities and in certain donation spots.
Right.
Kind of depends on how they come out. It's supposed to be it's somewhat random. In this last game, a lot of the spaces in the east were taken, so that made that connections up there very crowded. Sometimes it takes up bad donation spots that you definitely want to take. In this game, I don't think any of the donation spots that were verboten in the game were particularly damaging to anybody's strategy.
Yeah.
And in a 2-player game, there's a lot more of both those things. And then in a 2-player game, the route building is a little bit less of an issue because there's less opportunity to block people. But there's a lot more donation spots that are usually taken. So it kind of depends.
And then, so Matt, you just played it 3 and 4, right?
I haven't played it at 2, and I think my preference is for 4. I didn't dislike 3. I thought it played pretty well at 3. I was just the way these came out in our 3-player game, the dummy player blocking spaces really kind of jammed things up in the East region.
Yeah.
The donation track wasn't that big an impact, I didn't think either, but I don't know. I like the 4-player.
Sure.
I think there's a lot more thought and careful planning that goes into stuff rather than just being blocked by a dummy. It's like, oh, well, I can't do that.
Well, and I found it interesting because there's a lot of setup and breakdown.
Yes.
And so if we weren't necessarily recording the review tonight, would you guys have been like, hey, it's already out. Let's just, like, we did that in an hour and 15 minutes. If we don't have to teach another player, would we have just played another game of it?
I would have.
Yeah, I would have as well.
Okay. Yeah, I would have too. So what, probably indicates that it's not going to be lower end of the scores for us.
I forgot that the other thing that changes in player count is the number of department tiles that are removed from the pool at the beginning.
Okay.
So in a 2-player game, I think 16 of the 32 are taken out.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of singleton departments or departments that are just not available in the game.
Okay.
And I believe in a 4-player game, only 4 tiles are taken out, and in a 3-player game, I believe it is 8.
Gotcha. So I mentioned before that that I felt there was some opaqueness to this game, and I think I mean that in 2 ways. Number one, the majority of the scoring is done at the very end. Like it's all end game scoring. Like there are some points that you'll get throughout. In my first game of it, I think I had like 20 points early on, and then didn't do so well otherwise. In this game, I think I only had like, I don't know, 4 or 5. But then I did a lot better with end game scoring. So I'm curious in terms of opaqueness, and you can look at someone and be like, I think they're doing really good. And you could like probably calculate everyone's score at any given time. That would be terrible. What do you think about, games where you can score, where you're scoring along the way, and then there's some end game points, and that's sort of the spoiler, versus like this where it's pretty much all end game points?
Personally, I find it a little more engaging when all the points are scored at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I think sometimes maybe you're trying something new, maybe you're just bad at board games. Sometimes if it's constant scoring and you fall behind, you kind of check out a little bit.
Okay.
And when you're trying to like constantly evaluate where everything is, I find that really appealing.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely more engaging in a game. So that's my preference.
Okay. What do you think, Eugene?
Yeah, I think it's pretty engaging. I never know how well anybody's doing at the end of the game. Because I think in the game we played last week, I think the most points anybody had scored before final scoring was 20, and the end game score was around 150.
Yeah.
So it's quite a lot of points that are scored at the end of the game. You can kind of see, because a lot of the points come from the route building on the board. That's upwards of 36 points at the maximum. And you can kind of see, like, oh, this person obviously has at least 18 points.
Right.
Fairly easily. And then the donation slots, you kind of get like a general idea, but not like a very precise.
Well, and so I think this last game, I anytime I had a build action, it was one building, one thing I could actually put out on the map, and then I missed one because you triggered it when neither Matt or I had the build action available
for different
to us.
reasons. You didn't have anybody in the department, and I had no discs ready.
Right. And so you, however, when you were building, you were usually building like 2 or 3. I think there was one turn. Did you build 5? Or was it 4?
In the last turn of the game, I built 4.
Right. So I'm looking at it. I'm like, okay, so his route's going to be crazy. The links. And then, on average, you're getting like, what, 2 points? Because some of them are no points. Some of them are 2 points, 3 points. So like 2 points on average for each disc that you're placing. And I think, Matt, you and I were both like, oh my God, Eugene's going to like kill us, like lap us. And it was closer. I mean, you won. You still won quite handily. But it was closer than I thought it was going to be. And so I'm not saying any of this as a criticism, but I'm just saying it just, in terms of the end game scoring or scoring in general, it felt opaque to me. And then also, there's just a general, do you say opacity or opaqueness in this particular sense? Because opacity is more like a Photoshop setting.
I think you would say opacity? I think it's
Okay.
opacity.
Well, so there's a lot of games where someone will be teaching me the rules and I'll just feel like it instantly clicks, and I feel like I'll have a generally good idea of what I'm doing throughout the game, and I'm making smart decisions. I never felt that way in this game. And it wasn't your teach, Eugene, and it wasn't that the rules were difficult. I just and again, I like that. I'm good with that. And I'm eager to play more to try and figure out, but I just feel like I'm bad at this game right now. And I don't know that that'll change.
Well, I think I think there's definitely it's pretty opaque when it comes to strategy.
Yeah.
It's hard to know what to do. If you come from a background of Euros, it's like, multiple paths to victory, maybe do one or two things really good, but don't worry about those other things. But in this game, you kind of have to do pretty good at everything. Mm-hmm. There's no like crazy combos to be had really, like that you get from the departments or anything like that. It's just kind of slow and steady, building and growing that way, and just making sure you have all your bases covered. Make sure your transportation tracks are up. Making sure your cities are linked, and then you have relevant donations that you're going to score points on.
Yeah. What do you think?
So that might be one of my biggest criticisms of this game, is that every game is kind of the same. Mm-hmm. There's no like concentrate on this thing in this game, and then on a different game I'm going to go a different route for the most part. I mean, how the departments are removed at the start of the game is a bit of a difference. I think I've played slightly differently every game, but not like radically differently.
Yeah.
Some games I concentrate more on construction. Some games I have like really bumped up the project tabs with R&D actions. I remember an early game of this I played that I actually lost. I didn't do many get more meeple actions. Mm-hmm. I was just kind of like put them out on the mission, bring them back.
Yeah.
Get them working again. So in that way, I mean, they're all kind of different, but there's not like this game. I remember my play in this game because I did these cool things that were radically different from something I did in another game. There's no like really big, crazy plays in this game, I think.
So if Alex were to play this game, he wouldn't necessarily be able to tell a story about his company.
He would totally tell a story about this company. This person went out to the Midwest, and they built some infrastructure here, and they came back and then became a person in R&D and taught everything they knew. Say, I can do an Alex.
Yeah, there you go. But he wouldn't like this game.
I think there's probably a tad too much planning in this game. I mean, there are some tactical elements in this game. You kind of, like, if somebody picks an action that is completely unexpected, you kind of have to roll with the punches.
Yeah.
So, but you should have seen that coming, I guess. Maybe. And the game we played last week, it was a lot of actions, I think, where it's like, I'm expecting to play construction. I'm expecting one of the next three players to play construction, and it came all the way back to me, and nobody picked construction.
Yeah.
So, sometimes it gets a weird game like that.
Well, any other thoughts on gameplay before we talk about the game?
This game has a lot of things I find really appealing, just route building and technology tracks and things like that. So this is, I'm a big fan of those things in games.
Okay. Any last thoughts on gameplay, Eugene?
I think the gameplay is pretty smooth, and I like that it goes pretty quickly. It's pretty easy to learn once you got the rules down. We were able to basically get this going and get it done quickly, and we had a lot of fun playing it, and we want to play it again. I think that's a plus.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm sure This will probably come out at SeanCon. I'd get a game of this at SeanCon.
Definitely.
I think Ellie would like this game quite a bit. Not so much Mitch, not so much Andy, but Ellie would like this. All right, so theme. I mean, we kind of, like I said, have been talking about this a little bit throughout. We're industrialist philanthropists, basically. Is one of us, or are we?
We're wannabe Carnegies.
Are we wannabe Carnegies, or are we one of Carnegie's companies? Or are we just one of these?
We're level tier 2 rail barons. Carnegie is who we're aspiring to.
Okay. Are you making this up, or is that what's in the rules?
I'm making this up.
Oh, all right.
I think, in the rule book, it says, this is just inspired by Carnegie, so you're kind of just building things and donating things. And, I mean, it kind of whitewashes Carnegie a little bit.
Just a bit.
That was probably one of the bigger criticisms during the Kickstarter and all that good stuff. So there are some asides in the rule book. I don't think any of them are particularly critical.
Uh-huh.
And we are living in a time of, how about that capitalism? So, it's probably better that it's very Euro-y and you don't have to think about the theme too much.
Sure. Did you find there at least to be thematic connections between actions and what you're doing? And
yeah, I do. I mean, R&D, you get more infrastructure. Construction, you build more things in cities. Human resources, you move people around. Management, you're building more things, getting people working.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in that level, yes, but as a criticism of capitalism or an exploration of that, not so much.
Sure. Well, and I like the idea too that as you increase the transportation track in each region, it improves the income that you get, right? Because basically it's going from horse and buggy to stagecoach to rail.
Yes.
And so obviously the better system you have to connect out there, the greater resources and benefit you're going to get from actually pulling your people back and getting that income. I guess that makes sense. But I mean, overall, it's a medium heavy Euro, right? That's what it is. So, all right, well, let's take a quick look at guild thoughts. BJ from Board Game Gumbo says, I played Carnegie on BGA once, but didn't grok it. Yeah, me too, BJ. It looks relatively simple, but I'll need a live play to judge the merits. It's on my list for Dice Tower East next month. And I mean, I'm kind of grok it now. Again, I understand the rules. I'm shooting for stuff, but this wasn't one that came naturally or easily to me. Am I alone? You guys are just Carnegie geniuses? Well, Eugene, you are. Matt, you could pretend to be if you want.
It's been, there was such a big gap between when I first played this, when it was on Kickstarter, and then just recently picking it back up last week. I think the rules are not that difficult to understand, but I think the strategy can be. And sure. I also think attempting to play it on BGA is a little difficult as well, since there's so much stuff that's automated. You can't really, it's a little hard to follow what's going on, why things are moving the way they're moving.
Right. All right, so then Joshie and now Archie and Gur says, I backed Carnegie on Kickstarter, and I'm still waiting for delivery. I've played a couple times on BGA, but I'm still missing something. I'm hoping that putting it on a physical table is more enlightening, especially when you have to play out all the stuff that gets hidden by the digital implementation. Oh, we jumped ahead here, Matt. Otherwise, it could go right on the sell pile. A year from now, this game could either be anywhere from a 3 to a 6, and I can't tell. Oh, those are scores. Those are definitely scores. All right, and then finally, Sylvain Lacroix, who I mentioned earlier, he reached out to me saying, hey, Sean, play this game. Oh, wow. I didn't see that game coming. First of all, I completely missed the Kickstarter last year, so when a good friend of mine told me that a local game store had Kickstarter copies, I had no reaction. Then I checked a video, and 5 minutes after, I was ordering the game with deluxe metal cubes, to get free shipping. Less than a week after, I was already playing, and wow, This is my kind of game. First play at 2 players was around 60 minutes and it offered really great decisions. I love the worker displacement and how to activate each department. There's also multiple paths to victory, and I really enjoyed what the game had to offer. The game design is very elegant, and it gives me those feel clever moments that I really enjoy in gaming. So far, this is my favorite game of 2022, since Arc Nova is technically the 2021 release as per BGG. And while I don't usually give a lot of 6s, with the exception of Arc Nova, this one is clearly a 6 and possibly the best game of 2022. What I'll say to that is it's no Reload.
Reload is a game.
By the way, I did get an eBay copy of Reload and the 2 expansions for whatever that's worth.
Nice.
All right, well, yeah, that's very high praise, and I think I'll just kind of lead off here. I agree that it is a very good game of 2022, possibly a great game, even though I'm not good at it, and it's incredibly frustrating. But for longtime listeners, they'll know that for whatever reason, I enjoy being frustrated by board games. I think because my day job is not frustrating at all. So we rate everything here at the Dukes of Dice on a 6-point scale. 6 is an all-time favorite that's contender for the top 10. 1 is poorly designed but playable, not necessarily fun. And I think for me, I don't want to say being bad at a game should hurt it, but I think it kind of does for me. I don't know that this game, even if I was like excellent at it, I don't know that I'd quite get to a 6 on it. But I would give us a 5, a very solid 5, a great game. We'll rarely turn down a play of it. I feel like we're going to get this out at SeanCon. I'm happy to play this in the coming weeks before then. A year from now, is that still going to be my feeling? I don't know, probably. This isn't something that I'm going to go out and buy. That's not something that I think Raquel would enjoy, but I think it's really solid. So a very, very solid 5 for me. Matt, we're going to leave Eugene to the end.
I feel the same way about it. I think it's pretty terrific. It's a beautiful production, and I think the gameplay it hits a lot of sweet spots for me that I mentioned before. Things like route building and the transportation tracks, things like that. I'm going to give it a 5 as well, and I kind of see this hitting the table fairly regularly, at least for the near future, or probably over the next few months. It kind of feels like this might be this year's Barrage.
Okay, yeah.
Which was a game, when it came out, we played it a lot. Barrage is fantastic. I don't think this game is quite as good as Barrage, but I'm still going to give it a 5 anyway. I think it's terrific.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Like, again, Barrage was another one of those, at least for me, kind of opaque games, and very frustrating. But again, frustrating in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Eugene. Here's what we're going to do. You don't have to give us a score.
Okay.
But I'm going to read to you 3 descriptions, and you tell me which one it matches best.
Okay.
And I'm going to, again, 3, because I'm going to skip certain 3 descriptions. A good game, worth playing just not all the time, belongs in the duchy. A great game, will rarely turn down a play of it. Or an all-time favorite, that it's a contender for the top 10.
So I know that's 4, 5, and 6.
Well, yeah,
I mean, I've listened to this podcast before.
Sure. But just divorce yourself from that.
Yes. Okay. So
if you had to assign one of those traits,
it would probably be a 5 or a 6.
Okay.
Right now, I will probably not turn down the play of this. In the future, I can see like me wanting to play a game and really seriously considering playing this game, even probably a year from now. I really like the gameplay. I think it's beautiful on the table. It's pretty quick to get into once you know the rules. But is it a contender for the top 10?
Yeah. Okay, before you answer that, what would you say are some of your top 10 games?
Well, I like a lot of Vital Lacerda's games.
Yeah.
This kind of gives me that same sort of general feel.
Absolutely.
I think Barrage is definitely a 6 as well.
Oh, wow.
Barrage might be one of the best games I've played in the last 3 or 4 years, honestly.
We should make Alex.
we should definitely.
I would agree. Let's get it out right now.
We should make Alex play Barrage at SeanCon and see how that goes.
But I'm more likely to play this game than Barrage because Barrage plays a little bit less well at lower player count. I think this one plays well at 2, 3, and 4.
And Barrage is meaner.
Yes.
Barrage is super mean.
Yes. A lot of incidental meanness, kind of like this game. Like, oh, you picked that at just the wrong moment.
Yeah.
So, I think I'm just going to lean on it's a 6.
Oh, okay.
Because I really think that I will be pulling this game out a lot in the coming year and more. It is definitely going to be a game that I'm going to consider all the time. Yeah, I think that's probably where it sits. I do have some criticism about the game, so that's why I may consider a 5.
No, you said it's a 6.
But I think I'm going to go for it. It's a 6 so far.
Okay, so far. Well, there's the double take.
There is the double take,
which Alex and I are very good about following up with guest hosts on their score a year later. We're super good at that. Well, all right. Well, Eugene, thank you. Matt, thank you.
You bet. Anytime.
That's going to do it then for our review of Carnegie, or one of them. I don't know.
Carnegie.
With a 5 from me and Matt and a 6 from Eugene. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, before we wrap up the episode, we've got some runners up for naming the episode from our Board Game Geek Guild. So let's take a look at that. First, Alex Bastecki suggested Steely Resolve. His idea here was that we're talking about Carnegie, a Steel Baron, and because Alex is not on the show, it might afford me an opportunity to talk more about magic, and in magic, spells routinely resolve. So Steely Resolve. Okay, I like it. And then, but no magic talk. I mean, I could. No, we're good. We'll move on. And then BJ from Board Game Gumbo suggested Carne a Solo. I think that's supposed to be kind of a spin on carne asada, which is a specialty here in New Mexico. So the carne is kind of the sort of Carnegie, and a solo, because I guess I'm doing the bookends alone. No Alex, and also we're just talking really about the one game. So there's a solo, so to speak. And then Steve O'Rourke, the name father, suggested Mental Wealth. And this is a nice deep cut. So Andrew Carnegie had his Gospel of Wealth, basically saying, hey, if you die rich, you're doing something wrong. You should give away most of your money. A good episode title. And then Phil Hendrickson, and this is interesting. I find this one interesting. He suggested How to Win Games and Influence People, which is a reference to a very famous book by Dale Carnegie, how to make friends and influence people. And I think I read it in my early 20s. Someone's like, oh, you got to read this. So I read it. I don't know that I remember anything about it. Here's the interesting thing. I think most people, myself included, just assumed that Dale Carnegie was one of the descendants of Andrew Carnegie. He's just one of the Carnegie family. He is, in fact, not. I just found this out because I was looking it up because I was like, wait, I'm pretty sure Dale Carnegie wrote this, not Andrew Carnegie, but let me double check. And yeah, he had a last name that was similar to Carnegie, but it was spelled differently. And then after the book was published, he changed his name so that people would associate him with the Carnegie family to make the book more appealing, I suppose. So that's pretty interesting. I spent most of my life thinking that he was one of the Carnegies. All right, and then finally, well, maybe not quite finally, there's Kyle Kelly, and he suggested Steal from the Rich, but Steal is spelled S-T-E-E-L, kind of this idea of steal from the rich and give to the poor, all of the philanthropic things that Carnegie did. So that is your the best of the rest, as Alex likes to say. I do have an honorable mention, and this probably would have made the top 6. This is from Nick Kem E, and it's Temper Your Enthusiasm. And I've got a problem here. So I didn't know if he was just saying that to Sean Sean Connery. By the way, Sean Connery posted the Dukes on deck. I was too busy, so Sean helped me out. So I couldn't tell if he was just telling Sean to temper his enthusiasm or not, or if this was actually an episode title. I mean, I seem to think it is, because you have you tempered steel, and then it seems to be a riff on Curb Your Enthusiasm. But I couldn't quite make the connection unless he's saying I'm somewhat neurotic like Larry David's character, which, Nick, you wouldn't be completely wrong. So, but yeah, I just want to give that one an honorable mention. All right. Well, thanks again, Guild. As always, couldn't do without you. Appreciate all your help. All right. Well, that's going to do it then for episode 277, Practice. Thanks again to Archie and Gurr. Until next time, this is Sean and just Sean, and Duke you later, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the Dukes of Dice. Today's episode was recorded in the Duchy on June 19th and June 16th, 2022. Our theme music is provided by Carbohydro M from his Prime Legacy album. The Dukes of Dice are a proud member of the Dice Tower Network. For other great board gaming podcasts, check out dicetowernetwork.com. The Dukes of Dice are sponsored by Game Toppers. If it's not a Game Topper, it's not a showstopper. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks with Alex's triumphant return. Until then, game on.